In our first panel, the leading wireless industry CEOs, our board members, 3 of them anyway, have consented to, I want to say to be the guinea pigs, but you are going to be put on the spot here by Sue, so we're looking forward to that. And then our second panel will then discuss the legislative and regulatory issues that RCA is either currently engaged in, will be engaged in on the Hill, the FCC, the administration. Now, to get us started, I'm pleased to introduce our moderator of the panel, and Sue Marek, who serves as the editor-in-chief of Fierce Markets Wireless Group. And her current position, Sue, is oversees all the editorial content in several of the Fierce Market publications, including Fierce Wireless, Fierce Mobile Content, Fierce Developer, and Fierce Broadband Wireless. In addition, Sue provides editorial guidance for the publication's wireless seminars, webinars, and live events. She also runs and chairs the company's Path to 4G, as well as their embedded devices events. So Sue has more than 20 years of experience reporting on telecom. I'm sure all of you have read their articles. And she was also the executive editor of Wireless Week. Recently, Sue was named the 2012 Forbes list of top 10 power influencers in mobile. So I'm glad we have a power broker with us here this morning. So let me turn it over to Sue. We'll get this podium off the dais here, and we'll see the type of tough questions she's going to be presenting to our panelists. Here, Sue.
Thank you for joining us this morning bright and early. I wanted to introduce my panelists. I've got Jonathan Foxman, who's the president and CEO of MTPCS, also known as Cellular One. Next to him is Michael Pryor, who's the president and CEO of Atlantic TeleNetwork, and Hugh Mina, the CEO and president of C Spire Wireless, and also the chairman of the RCA board. I'm sure you're familiar with all these gentlemen. So I know we have some big issues to delve into this morning, but first I'd like to start by kind of tying in some of the messages we heard yesterday. Leap's CEO, Doug Hutchison, got up and talked. He talked a lot about the need for partnerships, working together. He brought up some somewhat controversial ideas of things like network sharing and spectrum pooling. At least in the U.S., that hasn't been done very often. So I'd like to start by asking each of you how did you feel about Doug's remarks and some of the other themes of partnerships among the rural operators? So, Jonathan, you want to start?
Sure, thanks. I think really the essence of the issue is that the industry has become so much different. Just a second. He's got to get the line down. Sure.
Okay.
Here. Express my answer.
Sorry, I'll talk a little bit more. Anyway, yesterday's themes also, yeah, a lot of it was network sharing and partnerships, and I actually heard that from a lot of the meetings I had yesterday with, the theme is sort of like we have to kind of partner if we're going to thrive in today's market. I heard that from several people. I think you have to go turn your mic on.
Okay. Sue is the only one mic'd up.
And if it were a lava, I could pass it, but that would take some time.
No. Okay, I think he has it. Okay, I think we're ready.
Okay. Working?
Yes.
Great. So what I was saying is I think the industry now is a lot different than it was a few years ago. And definitely I think that's a theme that plays out here with RCA and what's happened with the growth in membership and this meeting. So it's even more important than ever. So partnering, everything that we do as small and regional carriers is a lot more difficult. It's a lot bigger task than it used to be. Right? We're competing against much larger national carriers with much more advanced systems. The advertising spend that a lot of us are up against, the bar has continually been raised. So the ability to partner to help us overcome some of those challenges, right? So to access technology, to access roaming on terms that make sense, and collectively to form what can be an effective carrier, an effective competitor in a world where customers' expectations have become so much higher than they used to be, and that needs to be supported by so many more things, is really more important than ever. And just to add to that, the general industry dynamic of some of the big have gotten much bigger. I think that just puts more and more pressure on the rest of us to figure out how to be effective competitors, and to the extent we can leverage each other and create some synergies, it makes a lot of sense.
Michael.
Yeah, I think Jonathan hit most of the key points there. I think I would add, so we agree. I mean, I think really you'll find that across RCA, everybody is open to partnerships and really anything, being creative and as to how we solve having effectively a national footprint, at least together. But if you look at Europe, there has been a lot of network sharing. And in other areas of the telecom industry, there's been interoperability and sharing of resources for a long, long time. So it's complicated to conceive of how you exactly would work it out. I mean, the devil's really in the details with something like spectrum sharing in particular, but I think we're at a point where we really need to figure out how to use new techniques to solve these issues. Do you think your counterparts are and everyone's open to the kind of agreements that would be required? And I mean, even Doug mentioned that's going to be the tricky part, actually working out those details. Well, I think it is. I think it's really tricky. You don't get to that point until there's significant mutual need, right? Because if there's not a mutuality of need, it's just too tough to get through that stuff. So I can't sit here and say it's easy. I think it will be difficult because, as Jonathan pointed out, it's not the way it's been going for a while. Right. So, but that need will get us there, I think. Q.
Yeah. To speak to the need and to the challenge, good thing is that RCA is there willing and ready to help on network sharing and arrangements and all that might provide those who are in need of an ecosystem the ability to participate in the ecosystem. Historically in our industry, the FCC created an environment where all could participate in an ecosystem. If you go back to 1G, 2G, even 3G, but in 4G they have allowed the balkanization of certain spectrum and the big guys to get out front. And so we don't have an open ecosystem in which we can fully participate. I define an ecosystem as a combination of devices, roaming, network equipment, backhaul equipment, and spectrum. And the duopolists have made that challenging. But if we work together, we can mitigate some of those challenges. And we're fortunate to have a strong leader in Steve, and the fine staff at RCA will help facilitate these type of opportunities.
Now, one of the big issues, and this is, just last week, 700 megahertz interoperability is, I think, top of mind right now because of the FCC action last week. And basically, and Steve, if you want to fill in, but the FCC basically voted to investigate what technical factors should be taken into account to make the lower 700 megahertz band interoperate, right? Is that kind of a...
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's something that these gentlemen up here and their individual and collective efforts have been working on for several years. We're very pleased to see the FCC action on that, but it's not fast enough. As you know, spectrum pressures, deployment of new devices, the competitive forces from the duopoly require getting into the marketplace with a 4G ecosystem, i.e. a device and a network sooner rather than later. That's going to be key. What we have is a bifurcated, balkanized 700 megahertz slice of spectrum that was supposed to be the convergence platform. Right. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it hasn't become that. And so what we're trying to work very assiduously with the FCC to get that lower band 12, the first step, get it unified, get it interoperable, allow these carriers to go out there and not only create jobs and improve the economy, but provide new services.
I mean, how anxious are you for, I mean, is this really critical to, like, I know C Spire, you're in the midst of a build out. How critical is this for you to get this out?
Well, I'll give you a little timeline. In 2007, we put together a credit facility so that we could participate in the auction that was going to occur in 2008. We knew from having been in the business for 25 years, or at that time 20 years, that keeping up with your Gs is very important. We'd been through 1G, 2G, and 3G. And so we put a credit facility together, participated in the auction, had success, and we were ready to go. We wanted to deliver high-speed 4G services to the rural areas, primarily anywhere we serve, but certainly to the rural areas. And because we were not able to get the interoperable devices, we still have not rolled out services. We would have loved to have been in service already.
What about Michael? How I like Hugh's term, keeping up with the Gs. How important is it to you to keep up with the Gs?
Well, I think you have to. I think you have to stay relevant. What's interesting on 3G, 4G, I think there's a slightly different dynamic there than there was in 2G, 3G, because 2G, 3G was really about opening up mobile data in a different way and taking it beyond email. 3G to 4G, one of the incentives for an operator to go to 4G is actually efficiency of handling that data.
Right.
So you definitely, there's a competitive reason to do it. Customers don't really understand. There's a lot of 4G, but they know more Gs sounds better. It should be faster. So you have to do that. But I think the network efficiency of it is also a driver.
Yeah. Jonathan, is it important for you?
Yes, definitely. So the way we look at it is, in addition to what Michael and Hugh said, competitively. So the way we see it, it's very rare that you die in the marketplace from a silver bullet to the head. It's a lot of little wounds accumulating over time. And so to the extent you can't keep pace with technology, you risk losing some customers and dissatisfying your customers. To the extent you can't be efficient with your network, your margins go down, and that impacts the rest of your business. So it doesn't make sense from our point of view. What we've done with our company is not try to be necessarily a leader in 4G, but be positioned to do it when the right factors come together and there's availability before too much of those little competitive wounds accumulate that damage our business.
That seems like a very tricky place to be. How do you know when the time is right? I mean, is it instinct? Is it?
It's a very tricky place to be. And I guess I can give you a cop-out answer, which is it's sort of fundamentally the nature of business. So as a team, we have to spend a lot of time together talking about priorities, doing analyses, trying to judge where things are and where the world is. We know the broad parameters, the kind of the lines, which is we can't afford to be out front and go down the wrong path and be left holding the bag. At the same time, we can't allow our customer base to erode. But I think probably like almost everybody in the room, you've got to monitor your customer base pretty closely. You have to be in tune with what their issues are or points of dissatisfaction, and it's a lot of little data points that can paint a pretty clear picture.
Now, a lot of vendors that I was talking to yesterday said they think of the smaller operators as actually being more the innovators because you don't always have all the, it's easier for you to move more quickly and to be a little bit, on the cutting edge. Would you agree with that, Michael?
Well, I think the vendors are being kind in some cases to say that because I think in a high-end, big technology way, the biggest global carriers actually do drive that more. They have the resources, as Jonathan said. They can take that bet ahead of time in a big way. So you won't find, I think you won't find small carriers driving 3G to 4G,
But would you
all
see
by
them maybe
themselves.
innovating with pricing or?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think to survive as a smaller carrier, you have to be innovative in everything you do. How you sell, where you sell, how you put those things together, how you use technology. But I just think we have to be honest too, though, that to some extent, some of the stuff a lot of us would like and our ideas our teams would come up with. Let's just take mobile money, for example. Let's say you decide you really want to do mobile money. It's going to be really important in your marketplace. You're not going to drive that platform to where it needs to be for you by yourself.
Because you don't have the scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Hugh, you've actually done some, as a small operator, you launched the iPhone. How has that done for you?
There's a T-shirt out there that says, "I've been to Apple's campus in Cupertino, and I can't talk about it," and I own that T-shirt. but
Can you give us,
I can. It's obviously a
are
very,
you happy that you?
we're very, very happy that we have it. It's a fine device. Our customers love it, and we're very pleased to have it and look forward to a long, fruitful relationship with the people at Apple.
What about you other guys? Do you think the iPhone's appealing? Do you want the iPhone? Do you wish you had the iPhone? Anything? That was a lot of questions. Do you wish you had the iPhone, Jonathan?
Yes. Yes, it's obviously been accepted on a mass scale by an awful lot of consumers. It's a great product. For smaller carriers, I think the challenges, there are a couple of them. One of them is certainly, and Hugh and his company have done a great job of getting in queue and making progress on that, but there are a lot of people who would like the iPhone and are no doubt talking to Apple and working their way through the process. It's no small task, as I'm sure some of the handset manufacturers in the room could tell you, to deal with all the people who want to deal with you. That's part of the challenge, and part of the challenge is what we've seen in the press. There's an EBITDA impact.
Correct. Yep.
Seems to be a wonderful long-term thing to do for the business, but we all have to manage our financials and our bank covenants and that sort of thing, and so planning a rollout in a way that is manageable, I think, is key to that decision too.
Well, I have the T-shirt that says, "I may or may not have been to Cupertino." But if I did go there, it's awesome.
Okay. Anything to add? Or?
Well, I think Jonathan said it. It's clearly a device that consumers are very attracted to, and everybody has to make a cost-benefit decision, both the operator and the vendor too, right? But I think Apple wants more iPhones out there, so
it may be an option.
I think it will continue to make its way through this membership. I do, but I think it's a timing question for some.
I
go
know
ahead.
that they can't talk too much about Apple,
But you can.
But, well, we've tried for a long time to get Apple engaged with our members. And, once they get engaged, then they can't talk to us about it. But, but we're for more than the iPhone. And let's go back to the underlying issue. There was exclusivity deals and handset deals that really precluded an entire portion of the industry. I mean, these guys have been very clear with me, and their vision is RCA needs to help create an ecosystem that allows us to get access to all the iconic devices, the new devices that are coming out, in a timely fashion. And so we're doing two things. We're going to, number one, try to get them the ecosystem where you have a shared concept and create a business relationship that creates an ecosystem. Then we're going to fight the FCC to make sure they make the right decisions to ensure that we have a competitive framework. The thing that gets me upset is that the iPhone was not exclusive, as you remember, but it took 4 years for any other carrier to even get access to it the first time. And then it was non-exclusive because there were two carriers that had it. And guess who those two carriers were?
Right.
And then it was non-exclusive because 3 carriers had it. So all I'm saying is the iPhone is a good example of how these competitors could have been out there in the marketplace, maybe but first with the Moses. These guys were the first to roll out the 4G, was a smaller carrier, first person to do free weekend callings, the first company that rolled out innovative marketing plans and non-contract plans for postpaid customers. Yeah, I think innovation sort of comes along with the technology.
Yeah. And speaking of devices, Hugh, you recently revealed, or C Spire revealed some information about the LTE deployment, but you didn't mention devices. Do you have device makers? Do you have, where do you stand with LTE devices?
The network works a lot better if you have devices.
Yeah. And more people tend to subscribe to LTE if they have a device.
We plan to have a full suite of devices when we launch this fall.
Okay.
Sure do.
Is it difficult to get device makers engaged with smaller operators?
It's very difficult. Not because of the device makers themselves. I'll give you a little glimpse of our experience. We talked with one device manufacturer, and we were talking to them about a certain kind of device, not a specific device, but a certain type of device. And they showed some interest in selling to us. We certainly were interested in buying it. But they said they had to check with big carrier X or Y or Z or whatever. I don't remember which,
So
but they had to check.
They're concerned about offending or somehow stepping
Right.
on the toes of their big customers.
They had to check to see if it was okay to sell to us. Now, there's something messed up with that.
Yeah.
We all are using frequencies that are owned by the American people, and we have licenses to use that spectrum. We ought to be able to use it fully to bring the best services and products to our customers, including the best devices. And that is just a cornerstone of being able to do what we have committed to do when we took on the licenses that we all own. And it's just unfortunate that there are those out there who can control the marketplace. It ought to be a free, open marketplace where we can all have access to the industry inputs, like devices, and be able to deliver to our customers whether they live in rural Mississippi or in Memphis, Tennessee, or some cities larger or cities smaller than some of the smallest towns in Mississippi. People ought to have full access to all the devices, and it shouldn't be up to a couple of carriers about who can get devices and when they might get them.
Have you had similar experiences with device makers?
We absolutely have, and one case in particular I'll note is where we went through the selection process, identified a handset that was offered to us by a distributor, said we'd like to carry it. A couple weeks later, get a phone call back saying that that device is going under exclusivity with a major carrier, and so it wouldn't be available to us. And I couldn't agree more with what Hugh says. It's completely inappropriate and disheartening when that happens.
Yeah.
The argument, which I personally don't think holds any water at all, about exclusivity is that it's the basis for the device maker making an investment in the handset in the first place, and therefore it's a necessary part of the process of driving innovation. I think that's nonsense. But in that case, it's that we experience, it's sort of proof. No, the device was done, it was made, it was being offered to others, but then a big carrier says, I want that and I don't want anybody else to have it. That's not how the industry should function. It's not good for consumers. It's not good for competition, meaning carriers like us. It's a really unhealthy dynamic, but it goes on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What about, let's go to the spectrum issue. The NTIA earlier, I guess last week, announced it has 95 megahertz of spectrum that could be repurposed for commercial wireless use. Is that good news for you guys? Is that something that you'd want, Michael?
Well, more spectrum is better for all, right? So, what's interesting, and I include the biggest carriers there, whether you're metro or rural, everybody needs more spectrum. So I think, number one, everybody in the industry can agree on that. But the problem for all but the national carriers when spectrum is released is The next question is, who else is going to deploy in the spectrum, right? And so it goes back to devices we just talked about, Hugh's story about, when he got his 700. You really have a two-part question to you as a smaller carrier as to, whether that spectrum is valuable to you. So it really always remains to be seen. If a new band is freed up, well, what are the rules going to be whereby it's licensed? Who's going to deploy in it?
How
And
valuable is it going to
that's
be?
right. Is there interoperability if it's sliced into a couple chunks? And so I think it's just step one.
Is there a secondary market for spectrum? I mean, is there? I mean,
There is a secondary market for spectrum, but it's not a healthy market. The reality is that there are a fair amount of people who bought spectrum over the years as this industry rolled out, who did quite well, who never actually deployed. And that's fair. Those were the rules, and it was a smart business decision. But what's happened is, really only the biggest two carriers can afford to just buy spectrum anywhere and sit on it. And in rural areas, in metro areas they may need spectrum in some metro areas, but in the rural areas they typically have a lot of excess spectrum. But what happens is, if you're sitting on that spectrum, you haven't deployed on it, you always, if you give a last look to one of the big two, they're almost always going to give you the best price, because that's just the approach they've always had. They view it as strategic. They're worried about each other.
Yeah.
And so it makes the secondary market, in terms of really being available at a price that makes sense for the smaller carriers, pretty bad.
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
I'll touch on that just a little, because we have, the Spectrum Co. Verizon Spectrum Co. deal is currently being considered there at the FCC. But talking about the secondary market, I mean, and there's a real difference in the size and scope of the largest two carriers and the smaller carriers. They can not only buy spectrum and sit on it, but they can buy it and sit on it and wait for the technology to develop, and knowing that eventually we will know we will use it. I mean, I remember years ago there were two guys in Texas that thought it was great to buy Apollo Silver in the United States, and finally they had to stop and get in the middle of that and say, maybe it's not a good idea to have two people owning all the silver stocks, but it is a precious resource that when it gets more finite and more precious, but because it's your lifeblood, there's got to be a mechanism to allow everyone to have some access to that growth opportunity. And that's why we're opposed to the Spectrum Co. deal as it's currently designed. We filed a petition to condition. What you're seeing here is the results of, I won't say spectrum hoarding, but it's certainly spectrum warehousing, and very few people can afford to do it. These gentlemen have to actually use the spectrum they bought and deliver services on.
Right. So I guess, back to the Spectrum Co. A deal. I know. So you oppose it. I mean, how do you think this is going to affect the market if Verizon actually gets that deal done? You?
It's not going to help the market. And what's interesting is that Verizon is sitting on $4.5 billion worth of lower 700 megahertz spectrum, and the lower A and lower B, and they have not developed that yet. Yet they're out there seeking to buy more and more spectrum. Something's wrong. It sounds like the silver deal to me.
And the other thing is, I think it'll be a while before you see the actual impact. Remember, this spectrum has been held by a consortium of 4 of the largest cable companies in the United States, and now they've decided not to go into the market. And some people will say, well, it's out there, it's not being used. If it's not being used, what's the big deal? There's 4 potential competitors that will not be in the market. that will not be interested in roaming agreements, will not be interested in sharing networks, they will not be interested in providing part of the ecosystem, and it all will go to one company that is clearly not interested in roaming agreements and clearly not interested in creating an ecosystem that everyone can share in. So the impact is, I think it will be immediate, but it's the long-term impact of it. When is the next slice of spectrum going to come available? The NTI report, notwithstanding, or withstanding, and the British report, which just came out yesterday and this morning.
Oh, I guess I haven't seen that.
It's going to be 7 to 10 years before you're going to have a big block of spectrum that you can actually deploy a brand new, service on, like LTE. It's critical. This is a really critical time for the wireless industry.
Now, we've seen some of the larger, the tier ones, have actually put out statements saying, hey, we probably have spectrum good through, 2014. I mean, some said 2013. I mean, it's pretty grim. And in my experience in the industry, I've never heard operators actually give those kind of figures. How have you guys looked at your growth? Do you feel like you're in the same position? 2013, 2014. Some say 2015. In there?
Yeah, so we're in much better position if we could use the 700 megahertz spectrum that we've already purchased.
Okay. Yeah. So you've just got to use what you've got.
Right.
So let's talk about the wholesale model, because yesterday we heard from Light Squared. We know Clearwire's in this game too. Hugh, you've got a relationship, or don't you, with Clearwire? Is that your Light Squared?
We do. We signed a roaming agreement with Light Squared a while back, and we're very disappointed that they have not been able to come to market. It's a good opportunity for us to have a potential roaming or national type partner that we could provide for our customers as they travel throughout the U.S. That was the vision of Light Square, to cover metro and rural areas throughout the nation. It's exactly what our customers desire. It's what competitive carriers need to be competitive. So we're disappointed that Light Squared has not been able to be successful yet, and we support Light Squared and the model they were pursuing.
Mm-hmm. How do you guys feel about that model and the wholesale model? Is that something you'd consider too?
I agree completely with Hugh. I think the momentum towards duopolization in our industry has a lot of consequences, a lot of very insidious effects. So whether we're talking about spectrum, it's not really just about spectrum, or devices, not really just about devices. There are a lot of pieces. So any business model that can come to our industry and help provide a little bit more balance and a little bit more competition and a little bit more effective economical options for carriers other than the big two is a really healthy, positive thing.
But I guess we've never really seen this model be wildly successful, so it makes me a little, I guess, concerned about it. I mean, it's, we had an MVNO rush, in the 90s that didn't really do all that well. Now we're seeing sort of a resurgence of MVNOs, if that's what you would call people who ride on other networks. Depends on how you define that model. But
I think an important distinction is maybe you call the older style a 100% MVNO, the fundamental basis of everything for those companies.
Yeah, they had absolutely no network at all.
Right.
Okay.
But as an incremental aspect to our business, to me, it represents the opportunity to have some level of competition in roaming. So in the GSM world, which is primarily our business, there aren't a lot of options for roaming.
Right.
It's not a competitive marketplace. And when when it looked like AT&T was going to buy T-Mobile, the prospect of that was having only one potential roaming partner. And that's a dangerous place to be, and market dynamics obviously couldn't be in effect, right? There's nobody to compete with them. So fortunately, we're not at that state in the industry, but we're not that far off in terms of having nationwide roaming options for our customers. So in that sense, something like a LightSquared or a Clearwire or someone following that model could offer, I think, is appealing.
And I would add to that I would disagree a little bit that it hasn't worked, because if you start from the wireline side, there have been pure wholesalers for years. I mean, wireline, you always had to, or you can look at it as termination was akin to roaming, right? So you terminate a call out of your territory, that's buying a wholesale service from another carrier. You backhaul within your territory or from your territory to another territory. Quite a while ago, level 3s, global crossings came up. They started undersea, they came terrestrial, and there are plenty of pure wholesalers that were out there. Although I guess those guys have added a little retail.
Yes.
Yeah, they've added a little retail to it because they overbuilt for the opportunity,
Right.
and then they were forced to scramble. But that's really how you time it, and I think the LightSquared plan and the Clearwire plan are challenging. It's a very challenging thing to try to build even if they didn't have the GPS interference issue, it's a chicken and egg. So to build that nationwide wholesale roaming network is really tricky. I can't see how you can do it without the anchor tenant model, and that's sort of where Clearwire is, obviously.
Right, with Sprint.
But even that, as you can see, is very expensive and a challenge. But once it gets there, if it can get there, it will be hugely valuable to the industry, and it'll be hugely valuable to the consumer, because then you're going to neutralize that issue a little bit, and the best service and the most innovation is going to win.
Now, Hugh, you also mentioned backhaul, or someone, and Michael, you mentioned backhaul. Talk about how that's a challenge for you, and what some of the issues are with getting backhaul.
It's a challenge for competitive carriers because in the United States, AT&T and Verizon control most of the special access backhaul in the U.S. So,
is that still true? Because or are the cable companies also, because they do a lot of backhaul too?
They do, but they're still the two most dominant players in the backhaul space are AT&T and Verizon, and so you have carriers like us and RCA members who are having to spend X amount of dollars with competitors to be able to fund their backhaul needs. And so that's just another industry input that AT&T and Verizon have a strong position in and can take advantage of to not allow competition to flourish as vibrantly as it might possibly could.
Do you guys have the same issues, or no?
We don't really have that same issue. We have an issue with backhaul. We'd like to get the cost down. Your demand is rapidly rising, and in some cases we replace OpEx with CapEx, and we'll build it ourselves if we think the price isn't there. But we face that issue in our territory anyway, regardless. It can be one of the super regional elects. It could be a smaller.
So it's not
RLEC.
Necessarily always AT&T and Verizon in Europe. It's just anybody.
We haven't found it that way. We've found it's the pricing doesn't seem to follow that.
Jonathan.
Our experience has been a little more like what Hugh's described, where the underlying LEC is often AT&T or Verizon, and it's very much a parallel to what we talk about in the wireless industry, is that when there's not competition, prices suffer. So in a lot of our markets, fortunately where there is competition, where there is a cable company or a cable company affiliate and someone who can bring Ethernet to a site, it can be very affordable and an effective approach. But there are a lot of other places, and particularly we serve a fair amount of rural areas as well as secondary markets, and it can be a challenge. So if your only option is your main competitor, you never know for sure whether it's the pricing is based on what they feel the true costs are of serving the area, or because there's not competition to force the prices lower, or it's something less appropriate than
You
that.
just don't have choices.
You just don't have choices.
Is that something that then would that be an area for backhaul? Would that be an area where rural operators could work together to get some better deals, or is it just is each market so different?
I think each market is different, and it's fundamentally a different business. So I know for some RCA members, maybe in both businesses, we're a wireless only
Yeah, some have
company,
wireline too,
right? And
so
so
then they don't have
there's no realistic prospect of, short of investing in microwave, which again in rural areas isn't always a
Right.
workable solution because of line of sight and other issues. But we're sort of stuck with having to deal with what's available. Though the good news is, again, it goes back to the earlier point about timing, that increasingly there are more opportunities for us. And even where one of the big two is the underlying provider, if they're competing there, then it's more likely that they're bringing fiber to the site and other things that it's not as good as if it was a competitive situation,
Right.
but it's better than just pulling T1 after T1 to
Yeah.
the site.
And you're going to find that, as we get more and more, data, higher data use, OTT, over-the-top services, video services, you're going to depend more and more on accessibility of the available backhaul. We had a whole dozen or so competitive CLACs. It came down in the pre-conference session. They're looking for relationships, and we want to try to encourage those. One of the interesting things is, cable. Cable was one of the fastest growing wireless backhaul alternatives. And again, back to Spectrum Co., Time Warner increased their revenue last year 70% on backhaul from wireless carriers.
Isn't that
There's
amazing?
clearly an opportunity for wireless carriers. What I'm concerned about is when more and more of those levers get controlled by two large players, then it also limits your ability to build effective, efficient wireless networks, because we're going to have to get more and more Wi-Fi offloads. You're going to have to get more and more access to fiber, dark fiber, sooner in your network. That's one of the reasons that somebody like Verizon can build such an efficient network, because they have immediate access at any time they want it to their backhaul. They don't have to pull it down to another CT or another call center or backhaul it to a place that they say, if you want us, here's where you have to take it. And oh, by the way, you have to go through another switch or another call center. So there's a lot of ways that you can affect the potential price that a competitive carrier has to charge by playing games with a backhaul relationship that's not regulated, obviously, and it's negotiate the best deal you can. So it's something we need to look at, and I think everyone's going to have a huge increase in the need for that and going forward.
Well,
in the
listen,
4G
backhaul
world.
is one of the biggest CapEx costs, right, for you guys? And always have, and probably even more so in
OpEx,
future.
more so.
OpEx,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm not a financial analyst. Let's talk about, we've kind of talked about AT&T and Verizon being kind of the enemy here, but Verizon does have a 4G LTE program for rural operators, and I know some of the rural operators have taken that, are working with them on that. What are your thoughts on that program, and is it appealing?
I'm probably not a good one to speak about it because, again, we're a GSM carrier, not really
Okay.
in Verizon's world.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I'm not a good one to speak about it either, because almost all our markets, Verizon's the other cellular carrier, and they're not about to do that program
With you.
on that way, which is not a surprise. But the only thing I could say is that in talking to some of those who are in the program, I think it made sense for them. To speak about it generically, I think it feels to everybody like a defensive move, a very defensive move, not an offensive move. But but they really at least had an early way to map in that area towards 4G. So I think for some of the members of our RCA, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, we're not participating in it.
Clearly,
That's
yes.
right.
You have your own spectrum and prefer to go that route.
That's what we'd like to do.
I would say it was a very smart move from Verizon from a business point of view, but our concern is, again, it locks down competitive carriers with a network. They have to use the Verizon network. They can't use their own spectrum. In some instances, it means the spectrum that our carriers would like to use is lying fallow in that market, and they may not get a chance to use it for years. So if we provide an alternative ecosystem, I think you're going to see a lot of those carriers have a choice again, and I think that will help everyone, including those that have to rely on a Verizon 4G LTE system right now.
Now, I know some of the sessions have been kind of marketing focused, and how do you effectively compete? You talked about Verizon being the other carrier in your markets, Michael. I mean, how do you effectively market and reach out to consumers when you have such a powerful player?
Well, there are always ways to do it, right? There's always a way to differentiate. We differentiate a few different ways. I mean, one, which I think is probably universal amongst the competitors of Verizon, is you have to go for value. You have to make clear that you offer a better value. Not something, the marketing people are not allowed you to say cheap, but, better value, best value.
Better, right?
And, when we launched some plans not long ago to try to do that and try to make those plans connected between prepaid and postpaid, which is not something that's typically done in the industry. So they're very closely aligned, so a customer can,
Can you switch back and forth?
They can move, but the biggest thing is the salesperson can say, well, if they come in and they want the postpaid plan, but their credit is challenging, you can give them a very, very similar plan in prepaid, but still have some value adds on the postpaid side. And I think also, since we've joined RCA and we've gone around and visited with a lot of our peers here, I mean, I think one of the things, it sounds trite, but it's really out-local them. That's an advantage you have.
Out-local? Do you mean, is that a customer
how your
relationship?
distribution, what your distribution looks like, what the footprint is, but how you deal with the customer, customer advocacy versus a one-size-fits-all. I mean, I think there's a lot of pretty interesting and impressive things a lot of the people in this room have done there. And then you also, coverage still really matters. So if you're in a rural area, you still can be, I think you guys would agree, I mean, you can still work very hard to be the coverage king in your area because you're intensely focused on that area, whereas, the national carrier has a national focus.
I think we call it hyper-local.
Hyper-local.
There you go.
And so we've differentiated through a personalization strategy when we launched our new brand, C Spire, back in September of last year. And we're using an internally developed analytics system that helps us determine what apps and other services we help customers proactively determine what services might best fit their needs. So that has been something that has worked well for us. We're really pleased with that, and it also allows us to differentiate us. A Me Too strategy doesn't work real well.
And this is something you developed on your own? You said the proprietary analytics system?
We developed the analytics system and started staking out the personalized wireless position. And that has allowed us we have a service called Scout, which allows us to deliver to customers proactively the types of applications apps that they might desire for the device that they have, for whatever fits their lifestyle need. Also, the perks program. It's a rewards program.
Yeah.
And that has been something that we have been able to deliver to our customers who are interested in we're getting close to having half our customer base on the perks reward program. So it's taken off, and I think the personalization aspect is something that we as smaller carriers can use to differentiate and put us in a stronger position because we actually know our customers, understand their needs, and want to deliver to them a service that is impactful in their lives.
And if I could say that all these three leaders have been very open with their concepts and ideas and their approaches to the market to enhance a competitive carrier. And South's experience has been shared with us, and we're trying to incorporate some of those concepts in the App Store and some of the other programs we're trying to bring together. And I must say that all of them have been extremely generous with sharing this with the entire membership, not only through networking but other opportunities. And that sort of epitomizes the concept of let's create an ecosystem where we can have competitive relationships. And my hat's off to all of them for not only spending the time, effort, and energy, but actually delivering through their engineering, their marketing, and the various departments within their companies. It's refreshing.
Did you have anything to add to that? Was there anything different that?
No, not particularly. I couldn't agree more with what you and Michael said.
Personalization and
yeah. We think of it as really, there's threshold issues and differentiation issues. We compete with AT&T and Verizon in pretty much every market, and usually only the two of them. So that the essence of our business is how do you do that? And we don't try to take the approach that we can be better than them on every single thing for every single customer. It's just not realistic. Be good enough on those threshold issues, cross that threshold for credibility and satisfaction of the customers, but really try and hang our hat on a few key differentiation items. So outlocal them, I completely agree with the presence, being accessible to your customers and able to help them, particularly in rural and secondary markets, is not something that our larger competitors are very good at, and that's a great niche for us.
And I think we probably have to wrap up with one final question.
4 more minutes.
Okay, yeah. And this is probably a good time. So if you were to name one issue that's probably most pressing to competitive operators, what would that be?
For me,
start?
Sure,
okay, you're
sure.
ready. Good.
For me, what I'm concerned about, and a part of the reason that our company is engaged and supportive and enjoys working with RCA is I don't think we can all be successful unless the regulatory environment is such that we can be assured a level playing field. There's got to be a commitment to competition, and the regulators in this industry doing those things that make it fair for us to do business and for consumers. And I think that really, to a great extent, hasn't been the case lately. I think RCA has done a phenomenal job of helping move the needle on that. We still have a ways to go.
So regulatory issues.
Because it touches every other
Everything.
issue. It touches our access to spectrum. It touches devices. It touches roaming. It's got tentacles throughout the industry. It defines what we're able to do and can we be successful.
Michael.
Well, I know regulatory issues should keep me up at night too, but usually they make me fall asleep. So I think when you talk to people and when you sit there planning in your company, I think everything revolves around the explosive demand for data and how you anticipate that and how you meet that demand. And that goes to all the issues we've really covered, spectrum, devices, backhaul.
Yeah.
And how do you meet it and have a viable business is, I think it's a tremendous challenge for all of us.
Hugh.
And one of our primary goal is to do what we as a set of companies have done over the last 50 years in telecommunications, is to continue to grow our business so that it is there for the next generation to be able to continue to add value in the telecommunication space for the customers who live in our footprint and in and near the areas that we serve. And so whatever the challenges might be at the time, today the regulatory challenges are daunting. They really are. And so we have to spend a lot of resources on that to make sure that the environment and the ecosystem allows carriers to thrive to meet the customer's needs today and in the future. But like Michael says, there's certainly challenges on meeting the data demands. The business we're in today is nothing like the business we started in. It is data-centric. We're all just moving bits around today. We're not necessarily just completing telephone calls. So there are technological challenges and certainly regulatory challenges that are tough, but they're fun to tackle because this is a great industry to be in, especially wireless. Wireless is still not a very old technology and has so much potential, and we just want to be able to get out there and deliver the types of products and services that we know the people who live in our footprint desire to have.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining me this morning. Thank you, Steve. I know we have
you.
another panel coming up
Yeah,
right
we'll have
away,
another panel.
so
Thank you
don't
very
go
much.
Anywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, you.
Thanks, Sue.
Just wait until
Appreciate it.
everyone can get off the stage and
Sir.
we'll set up for the next one.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.